It's a real pleasure to have Leslie speak today. I am thrilled because I wanted somebody to speak on the outdoor living because as we went into the pandemic last summer, it seemed like it was really an appropriate topic for us these days. Um, Her description of her presentation, with longer days and warmer temperatures comes the promise of a return to the outdoors. After this first full year of the pandemic, do you have a place outside your home that you truly enjoy? Join landscape architect Leslie Wren, an assistant professor in the Department of Landscape Architecture and Regional and Community Planning at K-State, for a presentation on landscape design strategies for creating outdoor spaces that are deeply satisfying to us as human beings. Wren is a licensed landscape architect and horticulturist and has practiced for more than 10 years in North Carolina and Texas, including managing her own solo practitioner firm before joining the faculty at K-State in 2019. Her professional experience is primarily in residential design, build, and maintenance, but also includes public, institutional, commercial, and greenway projects. Wren's love of hands-on work has also led to stints as a farm laborer, a landscape foreman, and a leader of the volunteer installation of a school garden. She has a bachelor's degree in biology with a concentration in ecology and evolutionary biology from Rice University, and master's degrees in both horticultural science and landscape architecture from North Carolina State University. She's a certified designer of early childhood environments through the Natural Learning Initiative. To Wren, her work as a landscape architect is as much a vocation as it is a job. There's no place better suited for experiencing deep humanity than the landscape. Landscape feeds our animal natures, spiritual connections, personal meanings, individual creativity, and community life. Working with people to make richer landscapes is sacred. It transforms lives. And with that, here's Leslie Wren.
Wow, good morning, and thank you for that introduction, Chris. I'm thrilled to be joining you here today. This is kind of a nice, sweet palate cleanser towards the end of my semester to be able to come and speak to y'all about a very personal approach to gardening that really I came into after years of practice with residential clients. And I'm going to share my screen now and get into it. Okay, now let me expand my view so that it is full screen. Okay, can y'all see that okay?
Leslie, we are seeing kind of your desktop there as opposed to the slideshow.
The full screen.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's try this again. Is that any better? Oops. Did I do it?
It's still narrow for us.
Okay, so you're not seeing my presentation.
We are seeing your presentation, but it's pretty narrow. It doesn't seem like it's full screen.
Okay, let me see what I can do. Okay, and now if I increase this window, let me see if this will take care of it. And then, actually, how is this? Maybe I should just stay with this.
I think that's going to work. It doesn't seem like it cuts off. What do you think, Sharon?
Yeah, this looks like you're on a PDF rather than a PowerPoint. Is that true?
Okay.
Then I think that's, yeah, I think that's what we'll go with.
Here, let me just, I'll test this out. Is this any better?
It's the same.
It's the same.
So it's, yeah, we're good.
Okay.
But we can see your whole screen.
Okay, great. All right. So first, I'm going to acknowledge that at least here in Manhattan and for other people in Kansas, that Kansas is home historically to many Native nations. In the past, those have included the Kaw, the Osage, the Pawnee, and others. And currently, it is the home to the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska. As somebody whose medium is the land, I like to get deep, and we at K-State also are wanting to acknowledge more directly and openly our relationship to the lands that we occupy. So, people and gardens. It was a surprise to me in practice. We didn't get taught this in school, that when you work on residential gardens, on residential projects, it isn't just a matter of like, oh, here's before and here's after, and everything's fantastic. It's just all, peaches and cream. The reality is that nobody does any sort of improvement on their garden without it also corresponding with some sort of personal catharsis to some level. There's no getting out of renovating or addressing a garden without any sort of angst. And in fact, what I would characterize more as people's response to thinking about their outdoor spaces in their gardens is more like the reaction you would see to a scene like this, just kind of like, what has happened? Everything is destroyed. And there's nothing wrong with this. In fact, I've come to the conclusion that when we think about changing or updating our gardens, it's either because there's some deep-seated need in ourselves to affect more change in our lives, or it's the universe intervening and saying, hey, there's some other things that you've got to change. So people, even without the stress of the last year, people changing their outdoor spaces, their gardens, is always going to bring up something a little bit spicy. But this past year has made all of us different. All of us are changed. All of us have been traumatized. All of us are, using survival strategies to get through this. And we've had to deal with meeting with people through Zoom and Zoom fatigue and looking at a screen all day. Some of us have taken to the streets in protest for various things that have happened this past year. Others of us are just burnt out because we are in work situations that put us in contact with people who are infected with the coronavirus and put us at risk. Or we're also having to find ways to try and maintain our humanity, even if it's walking alone with our new pet adopted from the shelter and nobody else around. So we've had a lot to deal with. Everyone on this call and anyone you may deal with is already coming to the table with a lot of, as the kids say, extra. Gardens have also changed during the pandemic. Now this is most likely not in Kansas because of the tropical plants, subtropical plants that I see, but I love this image here because this is kind of representing what has happened with our outdoor spaces.
Leslie, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your slides are not advancing.
So we only see the title slide.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, let's stop. I've stopped the share. You know what? I'm going to try from PowerPoint and just see if that works better. My apologies, everybody. Okay, now does everybody see this okay?
Yeah, we see the title slide.
Yeah.
And am I advancing?
Yes.
Oh, thank God. Land acknowledgement. Before and after, not as it seems like on HGTV. It's more like this. It's more like a crazy, messed up thing. People, messed up because of the pandemic. So, you know, when we're thinking about redoing our gardens, we've got all sorts of drama as a main dish and on the side.
Hmm.
And now here. So our gardens, our outdoor spaces have also changed in response to what's going on. So we've got socially distanced seating. We've got a quick and dirty DIY kitchen garden. Some people are lucky enough to have been able to put in raised beds or get a garden plot. Some people just had to work with containers that they could get in whatever space they had. Some people got chickens and have been enjoying poultry keeping. The really ambitious folks, the go-getters, the A students, have also added a beehive to their backyard, and good for them. But also in general, it's a little bit tidier than it normally is because we're spending so much time there. And so we have time to tend to it or take a little bit more care of it. But this is kind of where we are right now. But things are changing. People are getting vaccinated. Hopefully herd immunity is on the horizon, but the light at the end of the tunnel is getting brighter. And so there is going to be a pivot from how we've been living and approaching our outdoor spaces for this past year to what we might need now. And if you haven't figured it out already, it's not going to be like an immediate switch. We're going to need some transition back into a new normal. So there's three things that I am seeing that will be part of anybody who works with gardens or landscape design or architecture that they'll need to be aware of in dealing with both themselves and with the public, anybody who they're consulting with, as we move forward. The things that we need are not strictly going to be things like chickens and kitchen gardens moving forward, but some deeper things that address who we are as human beings. Specifically, we're going to need opportunities for nourishment and healing. We're going to need opportunities for deep connections. And we're going to need figure out how to forge a friendship with not being in control. We'll talk about those three things as we move forward. So nourishment and healing. And I know I'm speaking to the choir here. You know, probably everybody on this call would look at a photo like this and be like, oh, that's how I would love to be spending my day. Yes. Not everybody is like us. In some ways, I'm reminded of, you know, when my daughter was younger and she was, and she would need medication and she wouldn't want to take it. And I'd have to be like, no, you really have to take it. You know, getting people to think in terms of like getting outside and working in the garden isn't always straightforward for everybody. Oops. But, you know, for us, we automatically think, yes, sunshine, physical activity, fresh air and food. Like, you know, that is definitely nourishment and healing for me. But some people will need some things beyond this. And those people may even be ourselves too. Now I'm going to check in real quick and just make sure, is everything going okay audio visual wise? Chris, you can give me a thumbs up if it's working so you don't have to unmute yourself. Okay, thank you. So things that we would think about being part of a garden that would nourish us. We would need to think about places where we could sit that we would enjoy. Opportunities to watch water or wildlife, whimsy and fun and a little bit of absurdity also is definitely helpful. Some people will need a new setting, something that isn't the same as the converted room in their house that they've spent most of the past year in. They really need a place outside that is different and provides different stimulation than what they've mostly been experiencing this past year. And some people may actually need a more formal space that would facilitate meditation or prayer or that kind of introspection. Now, these things, these are kind of, furnishings, decor, settings, those kinds of elements. They can include plants. They don't necessarily need to include plants. The most important thing is that we're starting to think about populating gardens with things that we cherish or things that feed us. And if you're a fan of Marie Kondo or KonMari, the KonMari method of decluttering, it's very helpful to start to think about, what would our gardens be like if every single thing in them, excluding, weeds and other things that we have to think about, of course, was something that just was like, an arrow to the heart, just made us sing. But nourishment and healing isn't just things, it's also activities. So things that we can think about that will start to, help feed that deep animal inside us, are just things that it could include sensory stimulation that isn't just visual stimulation. So it could be plants that are aromatic and fragrant like lavender, plants that have a wonderful texture to touch. Lamb's ear could be one, grasses. There's also other plants that create sound when the wind blows, particularly like inland sea oats, creates that wonderful rustle, rustle, rustle whenever the breeze happens. Anytime that we can create an environment where we or other people are experiencing stimulation of our non-visual sense, that's a way to kind of like do the tapping to our humanity. It starts to awaken the rest of us. Now, I know that I said earlier that maybe, running a kitchen garden isn't everybody's idea of nourishment and healing, but it does involve activities that are viscerally significant. So whether it's planting a seed, preparing a seed bed and planting a seed, which is in many ways cultivating hope, cultivating looking forward to the future, cultivating new life, or pulling weeds, cleaning stuff out, getting rid of things that aren't serving us, that aren't feeding us, making things a little bit tidier, harvesting what we've grown, getting to see something come to fruition and then getting able to eat it. Those are wonderful things. And, if we're able to also just speak to people about the importance of doing these things with intention, not just seeing them as a chore or a required maintenance, but seeing them as an opportunity to, think about cultivating hope in our own lives. Think about decluttering the things that aren't working for us. Thinking about enjoying the things that we have worked hard for. All of this can become like a larger healing activity. Other things that are important are just opportunities to wonder or to awe or to just focus on something that is incredible. So whether it's just laying down in the grass and enjoying the wonderful weather we have when it doesn't snow a couple inches by surprise. And especially, one thing that I love in May is when the cottonwood is fruiting and the winds pick up. There are times where you can just lie down in the grass and watch the lint just float up above and catch the sun, and it's magical. Or if you have a hummingbird feeder and just watching a hummer come, it's, like having a miracle visit your garden and personally say hi. And then lastly, things that are important are connecting with our loved ones, our friends, our family, whether we're able to set up an outdoor space in which we can meet people at a social distance or, congregate with people in our bubble. Or if we have children in our lives, whether they're our own or nieces, nephews, grandchildren, we need to think about, do we have a setting? Do we have something in our garden or our landscape that enables us to have opportunities to connect with them? All of that is stuff that is food for us that we really need right now. So I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that getting to the bottom of identifying those kinds of things is harder than it looks. It's deceptively, it is not simple actually at all. It's quite challenging. People, in my experience and practice, have a hard time expressing or thinking about the things that they love, the things that are really meaningful to them, especially when it comes to outdoor spaces. Maybe because many of us don't have as much experience out there every day. But also our brain likes to come up and start thinking with reasons why that is not a good idea. So I actually want to pause here for just a second and give us all an opportunity to reflect and think about this ourselves. I'd like you to take a few minutes, and I'll keep time. I'll let you know when we have about 30 seconds left. I want you to think about your dream garden, and no limitations right here. I want you to think about if you could make like a dream garden, what are the things that you really love that it would have in it? And what are the activities that you'd really love to do there? So take a few minutes, and if you have an opportunity to jot these down or find some way to record them, and then also pay attention to when your brain bubbles up and says no to something that you've thought of. Make note of that too. So I'll give you guys one more minute. About another 30 seconds. Okay. So of course you can keep, making notes as you're thinking about this. And I'm going to invite if anybody would like to share some of their things. Now we don't have time, unfortunately, for everybody. So maybe I'll open it up if 3 people want to share what they came up with. But I'll share something that I just generated too. Of course, I have the benefit of being able to include graphics of what I'm talking about. And I will also say, this is an impossible exercise probably for this crowd, because I imagine all of us would have like 5 dream gardens, at least, that we would want to do. But, it's a good thought experiment. So things I love orchids, love them, love peonies, love sambac or Arabian jasmine, depending on how you may know it. Love those plants. I love going barefoot and feeling pebbled paving. I love dappled shade. I would want to be able to sit in a hammock, and I would also want to have a koi pond, or something like that. All of these things would contribute to a wonderful setting for me. And of course, the first thing that kind of comes to mind is, well, how would you do this in Kansas? Of course, like my brain telling me, is this doable? And then you get creative. You start to think about, well, maybe some of the plants are in containers. Maybe the koi pond could even just be like a whiskey barrel with some goldfish, or I could find another way to do that. I could definitely handle the hammocks and the dappled shade. But what's interesting about this, if you pose this question to yourself or to people, is that oftentimes starting to see all of these things together gets a little thrilling, gets a little exciting, and enlivens you. So I'm going to open it up, and I'm not sure exactly, Sharon or Chris, how you would want to handle letting people speak, but feel free.
Maybe people can use the reaction button and raise their hand that way. I mean, I did mine in the chat, but. Or jump in.
No one will bite. We're all plant people.
Yeah, just unmute yourself and jump in.
The only thing that I would change about what I already have is I would love to have some kind of water feature.
Maybe list what you have, just briefly.
I have sitting areas, I have shade, I have place for hammocks, I have food, I have medicinal and culinary herbs, I have fragrance, places to gather. I have 2 fire pits. I have a little private space back in the cedar trees. Yeah, fruit trees, brambles. The only thing I don't have is a nice little water feature to tinkle along.
I love it.
I guess, this is Susan Rendell. I would like to speak to those gardeners like Sandra and I that have been gardening for a long time. We have gardens, hopefully, that answer pretty much of all of our desires. And I don't think it's necessarily that we're bragging, but we've put in 10, 20, whatever years creating these. And they are the visions that we've had, short of a deep frost in the middle of end of April, whatever, our frustrations with those kinds of things and weather in general. We can, and I think there should be a good handful of us out there, be very happy and satisfied with what we have. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Kathy, I see you raised your hand, but disappeared.
I'm back.
I am seeing
Okay.
in the chat, though, a lot of comments about finding a space to either entertain or to actually sit and contemplate. Those are the comments I'm seeing in the chat. And lots of flowers and smells.
Hi, this is Diane. I don't know if you can hear me. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I was just imagining, well, during this whole COVID period, I've just been in the garden nonstop. And it used to be when I was a younger gardener, I was just always going, and, and not really spending the time to sit and enjoy. And so I've added many more seating areas that are really comfortable. They're not uncomfortable. Like, for example, I have a wrought iron table and chairs, and it's not comfortable to sit at. It's comfortable to keep you awake, I guess. But my husband and I also discussed maybe putting in a pergola. And so, even in the hot part of the summer, that we can sit right in the garden, not worry about chiggers, get some fans out there, some misting fans, and just entertain and enjoy.
That's wonderful. That's fantastic. Let's see. So please go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I don't know if I can figure out how to show you the image from the window. As Susan said, or those of us that have been gardening for a long time, it's a process where things work and things don't work. And each year, it is taking care of what you've already begun and then seeing if you have enough energy left to do more. And I can't show you the view from my window, apparently, because I don't know how to get access to the screen. But we have a long tree line. And being an artist, originally, when we moved out to these 5 acres, we were going to create a walking garden that involved sculpture and digging down into the earth. We have done some things that failed, and we've done some things that have worked well. I have still grandiose plans of creating arcs that you can drive through on a 4-wheeler that represent the different periods of man, the Iron Age, the Wood Age, and the Modern Age, as you drive down into the pasture. But those are big projects, and we've done a bunch. I mean, we've made pavers, probably at least an acre of pavers, and moved them around. We tried to make a pond, that failed. So we filled in the pond, and now we're going to plant a garden there and try to keep out the deer and the rabbits. So we'll see how that goes, but there's always something.
That's the truth. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for that. Now we have time for one more, and I don't know if your name is Teresa, Therese, or Therese.
Therese. This is Therese Lawrence. I just wanted to say, I always felt we have a deck on the back of our house, or we did, and it always felt like the railing was a barrier between me and my yard. I felt so separate from the yard. Well, the deck needed to be replaced, so we decided to put on a screen porch, which made us have to move our furniture off the deck into the yard. And while the screen porch was going up, we had our table under the tree right next to the garden. And I thought, I found my solution. So now what we have our screen porch finished, but now we have a beautiful small patio with the patio set right in the garden. We're going to be surrounded by flowers this year, instead of saying, oh, see way in the corner, there's my garden. We'll be part of the garden, and with the scents and the beauty and the sounds, and it's just that, to me, hopefully is going to be what was missing in the last few years.
That's wonderful. I love when that stuff happens. It's like Dorothy realizing she was wearing her ruby slippers all along.
Leslie, we have an excellent question in the chat that goes well with this discussion. It's about for those with gardens of their dreams. Can you suggest what are good resources for planning and execution? How does one start, knowing it'll take a while? For example, foundational plantings, hardscape. Can you give a sense of where to start?
Okay, so let me just make sure I'm understanding. So you are starting on the journey of creating the garden of your dreams, and what are the things that are most important? Or at least where to start, what thing to start with. I would start with what is on site that's existing that you absolutely want to keep as long as possible. So whether that is a structure or it is a tree or some sort of massive plantings or an existing natural feature, you have to start with that and then start to understand like what you would need to do to protect and conserve that thing. So like in the case of the tree, you know, it may be that you need to start out with an arborist visit or some sort of way to get an idea of if there's any soil issues or anything that you may need to mitigate in terms of compaction or tree health or whatever. If there's any structures that need some attention because that's going to involve some disturbance. And of course, you'd rather disturb first and then do everything later than put in all of your dream plants and have to disturb. So that's the very first thing. After that, the way I would approach it in my practice is I first start from inside the house and I look and see where are all of the views outside the house pointing at or what's framing them. My students don't necessarily get this reference, but y'all might. So there was a really important line from Silence of the Lambs, if you can believe that, where Hannibal Lecter is advising Clarice on how to find the serial killer. And he's, you know, kind of Socratically questioning her and says, you know, what do we covet? We covet what we see every day. And so understanding that connecting whatever you're doing outside to the views you have and even the dimensions of the rooms and the axes that are in your house, connecting them to that is going to facilitate seeing them every day and in your mind thinking this is part of my residence. This is all part of it. And that also includes if some of y'all have second story windows or basement windows, you know, looking and seeing what are the views from all the different spaces. And then thinking about circulation, thinking about where do people need to go in and out of houses or move the wheelbarrow or drag the hose or, you know, move your bikes, all the things. Where do the kids run when they come over, whatever. Because you can't put anything really special if people are running through it. And if you need to, you know, provide a new path for them to move so that you can put your totally special thing in there, you need to do that before the kids and the dogs come and trample it. Then from that, we've done all of the unsexy stuff first. Then we get to start thinking about the stuff that really gets our blood going. You know, then you can start thinking about what are the spaces that I want and where does it make sense in terms of should they be pretty close to the house, pretty adjacent, or is there some reason to put them at some distance from the house? So things like an herb garden where it would be very handy for you to, you know, just step outside, pick some basil and come back in and keep cooking. You know, maybe that ends up being a cluster of pots that are close to your door or a little raised bed close to the back door. But if you're cultivating, you know, fruits and veggies, you know, that you're putting up or you're producing in larger quantities, you know, it's okay to have that a little bit further back, even better if it's close to your storage shed or your source of water. So this is kind of like how I start thinking through it. And it all comes from, you know, like what don't I want destroyed and what do I want to not have to do over? Which of course all of the lifer gardeners here would laugh at because I'm sure you've done things over, I don't know how many times. It is part of it, but you know, whatever thinking we can do to reduce that, we're, you know, serving ourselves. Last comment about all of this. When you get closer to creating your garden, you'll find things come up that will like frustrate you in your path because of budget, because of space, something, some sort of limitation. And this is where you get to get creative, where you can just be like, okay, I'm taking the lid off of my head and I am thinking, how can I think outside the box? You can start brainstorming, you get on Pinterest, you ask your friends, whatever. So it may end up, that you use a different kind of container for a plant, or a raised bed, or you start to think about seating in a different way. Perhaps you don't want to have a gazillion sets of chairs and tables, but you are able to take advantage of the tree that your neighbor just took down, and you can make an agreement with the tree company to get that trunk cut and moved over, and all of a sudden you have like a trunk that you can sit on around a fire pit, something like that. So that's my last thing. And whether, it's very easy for you to go into creative mode, or you have to take some liquid creativity to loosen up your thinking and start to do, solve those problems. That's up to you, but both can work. Have I answered the question sufficiently?
I'm not the person, so probably I would say move ahead with your things.
Let's do that. Okay. Thanks, y'all, for participating in this. Oops. Okay. Deep connections. When I was getting my master's in landscape architecture, my master's project was on sense of place at the district scale. So not the garden scale, not the region scale, but the district scale. And one thing that came up that was a surprise after interviewing people was that the people who had the strongest, the most robust sense of place were those who walked or biked or otherwise wheeled through that area on their own power regularly. So whether they were walking an area, they were riding their bike, they were moving around using a wheelchair, but regular foot strokes on the ground was the common factor in a well-developed sense of place. And so that has told me the importance of repetition in cultivating rootedness and connection. And so when we're thinking about gardens post-pandemic, and we're wanting to cultivate a sense of deep connection that people might have with their outdoor space, thinking about providing opportunities for repeated activities is a helpful starting place. So it could be that we're thinking about activities that we visit at a certain time of day, every day, whether we're having a morning cup of coffee or tea outside, or we do watering in the morning or the evening of some plants that we are growing. It could also be that we are taking care of animals, whether they are wild or domesticated, and that gives us reason to be outside in the morning or evening, and interacting with that outdoor space. And you'll notice that, those things that I mentioned right now, the only one that really strictly has to do with plants is, cultivating a garden that you would need to water with regularly. But there's planting implications for all of these things. So for example, in the top left, where the morning coffee was, thinking about, are there plants around that place where you would be having your morning coffee that are known to really shine in morning or evening light, like the ornamental grasses? Making sure that we have something like that to make our coffee or our happy hour even more special. Thinking about how we are setting up a garden that we might be watering so that it would be easy to water, easy to care for, and that we're choosing plants that excite us to care for. And that may involve something interesting or stimulating with every visit. On the top right, where I had shown the bird feeder and the squirrels, it isn't just about plopping a bird feeder in the middle of a space. You're also thinking about what kind of habitat you're providing in the surroundings that would support that. So are you growing things like elderberry, coralberry, nut producing species that would support the wildlife in addition to your bird feeder? I did not change the picture for the koi pond because it has the awesome water lilies in it. So, those are aquatic plants are definitely something to get excited about. And then in the bottom, I showed an apple tree. You know, chickens are really great at reducing the pest burden, the insect burden in orchards. And so thinking about, you know, if you are one of the people who got, you know, into pandemic poultry, you know, thinking about leveraging them or incorporating them into part of your maintenance of fruit trees or an orchard that you may have is important. We also, when we're thinking about repetition or cultivating a sense of place in our outdoor space, we can also think about spaces that facilitate ritual. And ritual has all sorts of forms. It could be something as simple as dinner outside every night, or a happy hour every Thursday, or, you know, whatever you might want to have, either with the people who you live with or neighbors that you could social distance with. It could involve a campfire with the full moon or the new moon, depending on which you would prefer, but having some sort of space that would facilitate some like a fire ritual, which is, you know, deeply meaningful to people. Other spaces that you could create could be something like a secret garden / meditation space / prayer garden / outdoor altar. You know, some sort of space where you could go to for that hortus conclusus, that enclosed garden feeling. You could also consider an outdoor shower. Bathing, of course, is very ritualistic, and doing it outside can be amazing, very lovely. So if you have an opportunity to think about bathing outdoors, I would encourage that too. And then last but not least, the act of cutting flowers and then bringing them either to your own house and putting them in vases inside, or delivering them to neighbors or to facilities where people would appreciate fresh flowers. That's a ritual too. And it's so simple, but it could be so meaningful. And I'd be remiss if I didn't stop and mention here that rituals can be extroverted, introverted, or both. You know, the extroversion of having people over for dinner or a fire, the introversion of a prayer space or an outdoor shower, and then the both with cutting the flowers and delivering them to people. So, you know, ritual has all sorts of different forms it can take in our lives. The last thing that I'm going to talk about with respect to connection is just thinking about ways our outdoor spaces can help us see a bigger picture. Not the bigger picture, but a bigger picture. There's different things that we can incorporate that help us do this. Of course, the 4 elements: fire, air, water, earth. Just incorporating these into our outdoor spaces or giving ourselves opportunities to come into contact with them is primarily nourishing for people, connects us to the earth, you know, this sphere on which we spend our lives. Long views are also important, and these can be harder to come by in suburban and urban areas. So I appreciate if some of y'all may not have an opportunity to capture a long view, but even small suburban and urban properties sometimes can have like a little part of the view of the sky, which is still open. And so finding ways to frame or facilitate the viewing of that long view provides an opportunity for that, you know, contemplation that comes when we get to look at something far away, bigger than us. And then a place that we can enjoy even when our eyes are closed. And I was recently in a ornithology lecture in which the instructor told us that sight is so dominant that it turns the volume down on all of our other perceptions. And that if we just close our eyes when we're on bird walks, we can start to find the birds even without seeing them, just by listening. And so this is a really good exercise that I've started using with my students. What do you pick up on in your surroundings when you close your eyes, when you don't have that? And it's astounding, all of the things that are around us all the time that we tune out or our eyes turn off because, you know, they want to be in the driver's seat of our lives. So thinking about things, you know, that are comfortable seating, perhaps wind chimes, sound of water, pleasant smells, all of those things can put us into a state in which we can experience a deeper connection with the experience of life. Okay, last thing to think about with these post-pandemic gardens is establishing a friendship with things that are not in our control, with being not in control ourselves, which is really, to me, I feel very hypocritical saying something like that because, you know, if you're a student of gardening or landscape, control is pretty much the name of our game. You're trying to keep control in some form or fashion. And so, you know, to talk about embracing not being in control, well, this makes me laugh, but laughter is good. So let's go with it. Anyways, something that I want to share that was my experience in practice is that oftentimes when I was interviewing new clients to get to the bottom of what they wanted and needed for their outdoor spaces, at the end of it, I would ask them, okay, is there any part of this area that we're working in that you would consider or be open to doing minimal intervention, letting it be a little bit wild, or creating a place where you can putter? Would you be open to not every square foot of this place being programmed, but having this a little bit freer or experimental? And more often than not, people's expression would completely change when I would propose this with the realization of, wait, it all doesn't have to be buttoned up. It could be different. Now I know y'all are, you know, probably prone to experimentation and wildness for at least part of your properties, but much of the public doesn't necessarily understand how to incorporate that in an outdoor space. And so proposing that, blessing it, making it okay, you know, can create an opportunity for people to experience some degree of wildness in their lives that can then facilitate that friendship with things that we are not in control of, with not being in control. So what am I talking about? What kinds of things do we have in a garden that we weren't in complete control of? We could have outdoor altars or places where we're collecting things that we have found. We could also make cairns, the stacks of rocks or pebbles, and we could even coordinate this with some sort of activity or whatever that would trigger the addition of a cairn in our life, whether it's, you know, getting vaccines, getting to see the kids or grandkids, getting to plan for a trip, passing an anniversary for the death of somebody who we've lost this past year. All of these things can start to be something that are dynamic or that we're working with, that we're creating. Other things that are embracing not being in control are putting in things like bean structures, you know, growing pole beans up some sort of support, or purchasing a packet of a seed mix and planting it just to see what comes up. You know, planting something just to see what happens. And then also, of course, inviting wildlife or plant volunteers into our outdoor spaces. I mean, of course, wildlife is always going to have something that we did not plan for that will be funny, but even plant volunteers can be fun. You know, in this past year, I let a bunch of sunflower seedlings grow up in my garden plot just to see what would happen. And then they, of course, got really big. And then the semester was upon me and I actually had to abandon my garden for 3 weeks. And when I came back, I was expecting to be completely chastised for neglecting my garden. And instead I came back to discover that all of my sunflowers, my common sunflowers, had exploded in bloom. And it was amazing. It was like being the guest at a surprise party. And that I wouldn't have had that experience. That I was, you know, expecting judgment, and I got forgiveness from Mother Nature, and it was really lovely. And one last thing is that important to accept, to tolerate, to bless, to welcome imperfection. And you know, all of us who have been gardening for a while, we know that there's plenty of things that are imperfect. But you know, taking the time to say, look at a tree like this one here that was close to where I lived when I was in Texas. And you know, being able to say, okay, you know what, you don't have the exact form that you might have if you hadn't been hit by that car. If the utility company tree pruners hadn't come through and just completely butchered your canopy. But look at you, you're still growing, you're still putting out leaves. You don't care that you don't look like a standard live oak. And in fact, you have healed over this gash that you sustained from a car wreck. And you're doing fine. And we'll do fine too. We'll all get through this and be okay. Or at least we'll get through this. But anyways, being able to see that imperfection is completely welcome in the natural world, and therefore imperfection is also welcome in ourselves, is an important thing that we can grow in our gardens. And with that, we'll open it up if anybody would like to ask questions or have a discussion. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so it's easier for me to see you all and see comments.
Okay, at this point, we're going to invite questions. There is one other question in the chat. There's a whole bunch of comments in the chat. If you're looking for advice and suggestions, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the chat there. But one of the questions for Leslie is the any recommendations for lighting in the evening? Oh,
yeah. Well, besides like fire, and besides the not very powerful solar powered stake in the ground lighting that you can get at a lot of box stores, there is the landscape lighting market is actually pretty incredible. And I'm talking about low voltage lighting here. If you have friends or connections with any sort of wholesale nursery or even an irrigation company, a lot of irrigation companies work in landscape lighting because it's a very similar, trenching and running things, and it's a similar process. But there are, the world of landscape lighting is wide open, and from lights that you can focus on, something very specific to focus on a focal element, and then have whatever's, bouncing off of that kind of help to light up a space, to using wider uplights that would light up into, say, the canopy of a tree and then create a real ambient glow. And there's even moonlights that you would put up in a tree and create a certain glow. And all of these have customizable lenses, apertures, features where you can really dial in the lighting level and lighting experience you want. Price ranges. Of course, like something on a commercial end, you're probably looking at spending $350 a fixture. That can add up quite a bit. But on the residential side, you can get into fixtures for much less. I haven't priced them most recently, but maybe like $60. So for $60, $120, you could create just a really lovely glow with where you're sitting. Now, of course, if you need more, it's going to add more. You can also consider the string lights and that stuff too. But the low voltage landscape lighting is fantastic for its ability to really customize the light level that you want.
I am putting some links in the chat box. So while I'm doing that, please, let's open the floor and ask some questions and comments.
So, Leslie, I wondered if for people who aren't in architecture, if you have sites or resources you might want to point to that are about designing room-like spaces or whatever outside, just a thought.
Sure. Yeah, okay. Let me see if I can send something to chat. Okay, so
Or you
there,
could send them to Sharon and she'd send out whatever.
yeah, I can do that. I'll do that, but I'll just say as a one-off, the books that are a collaboration between Sarah Susanka, Susanka, and Julie Moyer Maservi, called The Not So Big, Outside the Not So Big House.
Okay,
Great.
great.
Fantastic for helping, understand inside-outside relationships.
Nice.
Bunny Williams' garden design book, also excellent. So great. And I can't, what is it called? I think it's like on landscape style or something. I can't remember, but Bunny Williams has a fantastic book, just well written, great eye candy, very helpful.
Perfect.
I would start with those, to be honest. I think that would be a sufficient place to start.
Great, thank you.
If you'll notice in the chat, I am putting in some of our K-State publications. They are links to the K-State site, some from Johnson County, and it's just a number of guides, what evergreens work well, deciduous trees, how to plan, container gardening, lots and lots of plants. A great resource in general is the Horticultural Information Center at K-State, where you can link to a lot of publications, but I'm putting in some particular ones in the chat.
And I will just reiterate, I know most of the people on this call, have been working towards these things for themselves or have years of experience that are informing, familiarity with these kinds of things. But just in case, somebody from the public is reaching out to you, they may still just be thinking about, it kind of in terms of what's the newest plant from Monrovia that's being pushed really hard in the Garden Design magazine. Or, I saw this piece of furniture somewhere that looked really good in the picture. It's probably really uncomfortable in real life because they usually are. So being able to, bring all of your experience to somebody like this and say, okay, let's pause for just a second, take a step back, and let's get to what's really important for you before, retail therapy is driving your garden more than you're driving what your garden looks like. I have not been able to keep up with all of the chats.
There might be topics that we should,
Yeah, I would love to capture this.
I have a question about the lights. I'm sorry to have to go back, but my husband put lights in our backyard. We live in an urban area in Kansas City. And we live in Brookside, and he put the lights on partially for having lighting outside in the evening, but also security. How much harm are we doing with those lights? It looks like a used car lot. He has 4 strings long strings.
Are you killing the trees? No. Could you be pausing? Is it trees that are your primary plants that you're concerned about, or?
It's the butterflies, the birds. Are we disorienting them, or what are we doing wrong there?
Are you looking for fodder to take back to your husband with I told you?
No, actually, I need.
Kathleen, that's a different deal.
No, we joke about it, and it looks great outside. And when you're sitting out there, it provides good lighting, but it's on all night until 11:30. Should we?
Okay, well, I will, full disclosure, I do not have enough ornithology or
Okay.
entomology, sorry, background to answer that question. So I'm sorry, if I answered it, I would just be BSing you. I doubt that you are ruining the Kansas City ecosystem, but there may be, you know, stuff that you are discouraging from, you know, taking shelter for the night in your yard if you wanted. But I'm sorry, I can't answer the specifics on, are you losing pollination because of it?
One thing I can add actually about the lighting is if it's really bright lighting and it's on all the time, that can disturb some wildlife critters. But you know, if you're going to use it for when you're out there and you're entertaining, and you can just shut it down when you're all done, that works. One thing also you might try, there is a woman, she's in the Meridicine Master Gardener program. She does a lot of with lights and a sheet. She'll go out at night and have some low level lighting to attract moths to find out what is in her yard at night. And it's just beautiful. So she puts up like a bed sheet, a white bed sheet, and shines some lights, not super bright lights, but enough to attract the moths. And that way you can actually see what's in your yard at night. And that might be kind of a fun thing to do.
Of course, there's always motion sensor lights. If, you know, and I understand security being a concern. If it would be easy to install a motion sensor light that would provide you that and then give you the flexibility to use lighting when you're out there and then shut it off afterward. Everybody wins.
Thank you. Thank you.
So are there other suggestions or questions that we have? If not, I will turn it over to Chris Sundstrom, who will thank our speaker. Thank you, Leslie, and tell us what's coming up next month.
Thanks, Leslie. I really like the fodder and I appreciate the resources because if people truly get into designing, they might want to go that further step. And next month, our presentation is on food preservation, and Susan Farley who's locally with the Extension Office will work on that because that's one of the other things that we geared up on during the pandemic. Leslie, thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. This presentation was recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.